in the domain of finance, costing, internal audit, legal, and company secretarial function. He has handled merger, acquisition, corporate and financial restructuring, anti-dumping, and corporate governance mechanism. Currently, he is CEO of Insolvency Professional Agency of Institute of Cost Accountants of India. Is a member of various board of companies as independent director. He is a member of the corporate governance, capital market, corporate affairs, banking, and finance committee of the PhD CCI. He has chaired and addressed a large number of national and international seminars and conferences. Dr. Gupta is a very good writer and he has written more than 150 articles and research papers, which has been published in various professional journals. Most important, he is also working as a guide and guiding 5 PhD scholars to get their PhD. Last but not least, he is having a very unique quality that very few people have, that he play flutes, and he has released lot of album of song and bhajans which has played by him on flute. So today we are very fortunate to having such a eminent personality with us, and not taking much, I will directly invite Dr. S.K. Gupta to interact with you. Dr. Gupta, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this webinar session. I'm thankful to Pimpri Chinchwad chapter of Institute of Cost Accountants of India for organizing this session and giving me an opportunity to share my perspective and thoughts on this emerging dimension of finance that is known as ethical finance. Before I start my presentation, let me share my presentation with you on the screen. Just give me a second, please. So ethical finance, we're going to talk about what is the broad characteristic, dimension, and situation of the business world across the globe today. Today in the COVID-19 pandemic times, and even otherwise, the kind of dynamic situation that we have in the business environment. And from there, we'll take a cue as to how should finance be managed in these difficult times and in this VUCA world. And when we talk about finance, then we'll talk about responsibility of the finance professionals. And there, the concept of ethical finance will fit in. And then we'll talk about what is ethical finance, how does it work, why is it required, what has been the development in this particular area over the last few decades across the world based upon my research on the subject, and then how to make sure that we all tend to work towards building up the structure, edifice, and architecture of ethical finance going forward. Well, the world is changing very, very fast. It is changing at a very rapid pace. It has always been an evolving and a changing world, no doubt about that. But the pace of change and the direction of change and the complexity of change has become manifold over the last few decades that we have seen the businesses evolving. It's a VUCA world today. The business world is highly vulnerable, highly uncertain, very complex, and very ambiguous, and all that makes the business world a very exciting place to be in. At the same time, provides a lot of opportunities for the businessmen as well as for the corporate organizations to cater to the requirements and wants of the customers and build up the companies going forward on a sustainable basis. Some of the key changes which are very, very clearly discernible on the landscape or the corporate landscape. First is that we are witnessing very, very disruptive business models which have really changed the rules of the game. If to give you a few examples here, we live in a world where the world's largest travel car company does not own a single car. The answer is Uber. The largest travel lodging company in the world does not own a single hotel room of their own. That's Airbnb. The largest retailer of the world doesn't have a single brick and mortar store. That's Amazon. These are very, very disruptive business models, which were kind of unheard of till about a few decades back. But these are the businesses which are realities today, and they are the power engine which are driving the economic growth and driving the business activity across the world. Out of all these companies, which are the new age companies kind of thing, when you look at their financials, when you look at their operational performance, many a time we come across situations where there is profitless turnover. These companies might have a huge top line, a very good turnover, but end of the day, there's nothing left for the stockholders. There is no profit available. Or probably we might come across some companies which have cashless profit. They have a good enough bottom line, but end of the day, there is no liquidity or there is no cash. But when you look at the valuation of these companies, wow, surprisingly skyrocketing. There is a beeline of investors who are wanting to put their money into these new age businesses because of their potential for growth and scaling up going forward in future period of time. These are very, very disruptive business models, and they have disrupted the traditional hierarchical kind of organizational systems. They have challenged the traditional decision making models, and they have brought about absolutely a new way of doing business or new way of carrying out the affairs of the business enterprises. Technology has significantly transformed the way we live our life and the way we work in the organizations. Just to take a simple example, before lockdown, which started from 25th of March 2020, many of us would never have actually attempted to do a web session on a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Skype or anything of that sort. But this has been a great learning for many of us, and we are now commonly using these technologies for interfacing and for having organizational meetings on a time to time basis. Moreover, with the advent of internet, Twitter, WhatsApp, internet, all these things, they have greatly transformed the way we live and we work in the organizations. I mean, research says that any two persons in this planet today, they are just 4 clicks away. I mean, I don't know someone who might be in US or Brazil or Canada for that matter. But then if I want to get hooked onto him, if I want to get connected to him, it's just a matter of 4 clicks. So to tell you by way of an example, I may be connected to someone on the LinkedIn, A to B, and then B might be connected with C might be connected with D. End of the day, A is in touch, A is in connect with D. That's what is the beauty and power of technology that we are witnessing. Demographic shifts are taking place across the world. Socio-economic fabric of the societies is changing, and that's reshaping the entire society as well as the workforce content that we have. The millennials, they're the driving force behind the corporates today, and they are bringing in new ways of doing things with more alacrity, with more intelligence, with more creative thinking, with more innovative ways of carrying out a particular function. Globalization has changed the rules across all worlds. India proceeded on the path of liberalization, privatization, globalization, beginning from 1991, and it has integrated Indian economy with the world economy to a great extent. So anything that happens elsewhere, anytime, anywhere a butterfly flutters, it has its implications, ripples and ramifications in the Indian economy as well. And that's true for all countries. Why only India? Because all the countries of the world today are intermittently connected to each other because of the effect of globalization. Customer expectations have dramatically increased. The customers of today are wanting more and more. They're expecting everything faster, better, more differentiated, and they want personalized services more than ever before. Customer satisfaction is the old fathom now of the marketing. Today we talk about customer delight. Customer delight is one step ahead of customer satisfaction, where we try to provide benefits and functional utility to the customer, or basically an experience to the customer which is more than what he actually expects from a business or from a product. Climate change has had a huge environmental impact all across the world, and people are becoming more responsible and more aware about the aspect of sustainability. But then sustainability is more than a mere buzzword in the corporate world today. People are taking sustainability issues on a serious note, including that of corporate social responsibility, which is now the front and center in the fundamental purpose of organizations. Now, all these devastating changes, significant changes taking place in the business landscape across the world have brought about a realization amongst the people. Well, if you got to be carrying out your business on a sustainable basis going forward, you have to make sure that all your business actions, all your corporate actions are based on the solid edifice of a value system or ethics or a code of conduct which is based on the principles of fairness, transparency, non discrimination, and the moral values that we all have learned from our Dharma books and even otherwise as part of our study courses. When it comes to finance, finance is an all pervasive function of any organization. In fact, it is the first important aspect that anytime when someone wants to start a business or get into a business activity, the first question that arises or the first problem that needs to be addressed is how much funds do we need? And then where do I get those funds from? Once these two aspects are taken care of, then once you have the funds available for a corporate entity, the next important aspect is how do I deploy them
Just 1 minute.
so as to
Yes,
make
sir.
sure that I'm
Please
able
mute.
to get maximum out of each rupee which is spent in the organization and am able to optimally utilize the financial resources available with the company.
Because sir, could you mute all other members because we can see the echo.
There's some noise and echo
Suresh sir is
coming.
having on the line.
No,
Just
no.
tell him to mute.
Sir, unmute the Basaraj sir as well. Basaraj Mule.
So the growing themes around sustainability, climate change and social justice, combined with the concerns arising from 2008 financial crisis led by the mortgage subprime mortgage crisis of US,
Gupta sir,
has led to
just follow
increased interest and awareness in making
हाँ रे
the private sector more responsible that
sir,
operates on
just
a more ethical basis.
wait for
Now,
one
generally
minute.
speaking, financial management, we talk about unethical
सागर
practices.
Sir.
Unethical
I think
practices in
echo voice
finance may
from Gupta
relate
sir.
to maybe
No,
some kind
sir.
of a window
Just mute the
dressing
Basaraj sir as well.
where people may try to project the
Because
situation or
इथे कुणीच
performance of a company which may not be in line with the
Just
realistic
mute the Basaraj Mule.
position.
सगळे म्यूट आहेत
नाहीये.
कोण
Basaraj Mule. Just mute the Basaraj Mule as well.
एक मिनिट बसवराज मुले ओके सॉरी या
Okay. Yeah, Gupta sir, sorry for the
Okay, thank you. Now it is better. Sure,
inconvenience.
sure.
I will just go
Right.
ahead.
So ethical finance is a system of financial management or investment that seeks qualitative outcomes other than purely the management of returns. Normally, when you look at performance of an organization, you look at the quantitative data, you look at the ROI, return on investment, you look at ROCE, return on capital employed, you look at EPS, earnings per share, you look at P multiple, price to earning ratio, or you may look at balance scorecard, or you may probably look at the PERT or DuPont analysis with a view to finding out performance of a company over a period of time. But ethical finance as a system and dimension of financial management or investment looks at qualitative outcomes as a result of an investment made by a company in a particular segment or a particular project or a particular geography or territorial area. Outcomes which are considered important and outcomes which are measured reflect ideas from faith, social, environmental, and governance dimensions or theories. Not long ago, the notion of generating social good along with financial returns was considered only a fringe idea by most of the investors across the world. But recently, and because of the developments taking place in the world as a whole, with UN also coming out with sustainability development goals to be achieved by 2030, the world has started looking at social finance, and this concept has now entered the mainstream. It has received consideration from Wall Street giants and some of the world's largest institutional investors. As I was telling you, we live in an interconnected and globalized world where anything that happens outside the frontiers of the country, it immediately gets ramifications, repercussions, ripples happening in other countries of the world. Under such a volatile financial situation, we need to rebuild a real economy, which is an economy or a system of production and consumption, which is built upon ethical, sustainable, and responsible principles. You got to be ethical in your finance practices. You got to build the organization on a sustainable basis, and you have to be responsible. An ever increasing section of civil society is aware of this and is calling for new rules and evaluation criteria which takes into account impacts upon the environment and the people. So whenever you look for investing in a new project, the common technique that we apply in financial management is known as capital budgeting, or the methods for evaluating alternate capital investment techniques. What we do in that case is look at what is the amount being invested in the project, what are the likely possible returns over a given number of years in future. We discount the future expected cash flows at a certain discount rate so as to arrive at their present value equivalent. And then we compare the two together, the present value of cash outflows vis-a-vis the present value of cash inflows, and then take a call whether it is worth investing in a project or not. Of course, you also apply internal rate of return for evaluating a given project. But all these techniques are purely based upon the expectation of a given return on investment. It's based upon kind of a hurdle rate criteria that everyone before putting up a new project or investing in a new project has in mind a kind of a threshold. Return less than this will not be acceptable to me. I won't be willing to put my money into this project. But at least a return greater than this particular hurdle rate or a hurdle number, I think I would be willing to make investment in that particular project. But this purely financial quantitative analysis of projects is now undergoing a metamorphosis, is now undergoing a change. People are now looking at the social outcome, the environmental outcome, besides looking at the financial outcome from a project. So instead of only focusing on profit, the concept of triple bottom line is fast catching up, where companies are looking at 3 P's instead of just 1 P. Profit, of course, it's important. You can't survive for a long time. You can't build a sustainable organization without having adequate or a reasonable amount of profit. But the other 2 P's are also becoming the center point of discussion in the management arena. People, planet, profits. Your projects or your company operations must have social relevance. They should be able to create positive social outcomes. Your activities in a corporate world must be environmental friendly. That's where we talk about environmental protection or trying to become water positive. I mean, there are companies in the world today which look to achieve carbon neutrality or trying to become water positive, in addition to, of course, having a reasonable rate of return to satisfy the expectation of the stakeholders. The world is passing through an economic and financial crisis, especially impacted by COVID-19, unprecedented pandemic in modern times. Its global scope transcends the cyclical adjustments of national economies and the corrective instruments usually used by business and national governments. We are all familiar with the concept of business cycles. There are always ups and downs in the lives of each individual, me, you, all of us. At the same time, there are always ups and downs happening, or there are phases of boom, recession, depression, and recovery, constantly evolving and changing the corporate landscape. And that happens in all kinds of economies, whether capitalist economy or a socialist economy or a mixed economy like that of India. But whatever strategies you deploy to prevent yourself or your company from being impacted deeply by these business cycles, there are certain aspects of business which can definitely help you smother the impact of these phases and thus enable you to sail through these different phases of business cycle in a more resilient manner, in a more easy manner. The general malaise and loss of confidence point to deeper issues and more fundamental flaws in the economic system, extending to a crisis of leadership and values. Lehman Brothers failure, Satyam fiasco in India 2007-2008. You can have a number of stories and number of case studies regarding leadership failures, mainly on account of the ethical malaise. Everyone has a code of conduct. We cost accountants have a code of conduct. The Chartered Accountants Institute has a code of conduct. Company secretaries has, engineers, doctors. Everyone has a code of conduct. Then why is it somehow that even people who are guided, regulated by the code of conduct also tend to act in a way which is unethical, which is unbecoming of a professional? Well, it's all on account of greed, and it's all on account of trying to make big, I mean, without waiting for right time to come for the business or personally to succeed in the marketplace. It's all on account of some ethical practices being followed by them because of some reason or the other. What is important is that in spite of your having a code of conduct governing your professional regulation and profession, you got to be making these values and code of conduct as part of your DNA. You have to live the code of conduct. What I mean by living the code of conduct here is because ethical finance is essentially based on the notion of an ethical conduct on the part of the professional managers of the company, the investors, and also the beneficiary on the other side, the society and the environment, and of course, the stockholders or the stakeholders of the corporate entity. I was addressing a gathering of professionals at one point of time in some seminar, and they were all professionals from different streams coming together, a strong audience, about 500 people sitting there in the auditorium. On that particular day, the discussion theme that I had chosen for my presentation was Code of Conduct and Ethics. Besides whatever I spoke for about 10-15 minutes in that presentation, I essentially raised 4 questions to the people present there. My first question was, are you regulated by some kind of a code of conduct? Everyone said yes, because this was a gathering of professionals. I know that each one of them were being regulated by their professional institute as part of their code of conduct and code of ethics. Everyone said yes. My next question was, have you read it? I mean, there must be some kind of a guidance booklet, some kind of rules and regulations regarding code of conduct. Have you gone through it carefully? Many of the people still said yes. My third question was, have you understood it? Very few hands were up there in the audience at this point of time. And my last question that I posed to the group was, do you live by the code of conduct? Believe me, very, very few hands were up there in the audience at that point of time. What is important for being ethical in your practices, not only in ethical finance, but all aspects of your professional working? You got to be ethical, and that is possible only when you make ethics a part of your DNA. It has to be oozing out of your every action that you take. It has to be part of your daily life. It has to be part of every action that you take as your responsibility of being a professional manager in a corporate entity. Ethical finance aims to develop a fairer and a more equitable interaction between humanity and the environment through the global economy. Why do corporate entities emerge and survive? Because they fulfill certain needs and wants of the humanity. They produce certain products and services which are required, needed by people on this planet. So, on one side, they have to cater to humanity. On the other side, they are also circumstanced and bounded. There is an overall parameter within which they have to operate. That's the environment. So, if you can somehow establish a linkage between efficient functioning of a corporate enterprise as interlinked, as coupled with humanity on one side, environment on the other side, I think that is the desirable way forward for all of us. Defining the term ethical finance is difficult because it's a concept which is fast emerging. It's a philosophy by itself. It's a concept. It's an umbrella concept for a philosophy of investing based on combination of financial, social, environmental, and sustainability criteria. Not only financial. If we were only talking about pure finance in traditional sense, then this three-line statement of mine in red would have stopped at the point of financial, and there would be no word combination over there. But because I'm using the words combination of financial, social, environmental, and sustainability criteria, that is what distinguishes ethical finance from traditional finance. Ethical finance is a commonly used term to describe financial actions, to describe financial decision making, which takes into account not only financial returns or financial ROI, but also ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance factors. This reflects an increasing recognition of the importance and value attributed by investors to delivering measurable positive environmental and social impact on a sustainable basis. Ethical finance is a long established process of investing and financial management along values-based principles. It's not an easy concept to apply in real life. I'll come to that slightly later. Challenges in scaling up ethical finance, but to tell you and introduce to you briefly, one of the important challenges that we face in ethical finance is the terminology that defines as to what is an ethical action, what is not an ethical action, so far as the finance dimension of corporate entity is concerned. Secondly, it involves measuring the outcomes, not only financial, but it involves measuring the social and environmental outcomes, which is not easy. You can measure only what is quantitative in nature. Of course, you can have qualitative measurement as well, but then qualitative measurement is always subjective. It depends what kind of lens you are wearing at a given point of time when you're looking at a social or an environmental outcome in a given situation. According to a report produced by Commission on the Measurement of Economic Progress and Social Progress, chaired by Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate in economics, GDP, gross domestic product, is an inadequate metric to gauge well-being of people over time, particularly in its economic, environmental, and social dimensions, some aspects of which are often referred to as sustainability. India's GDP currently is 2.8 trillion US dollars. Mr. Modi has given a clarion call of reaching on a 5 trillion US dollar economy by 2024. Even without COVID-19, this was not possible. We all knew about that, but no issues. You may not be able to achieve that by 2024. You might actually be able to achieve that number by 2027 or 2028, but at least we have a vision for the people of the country to be looking at and working towards that. So no harm in having a vision of reaching a $5 trillion economy as of today. US economy currently is at about 22, 23 trillion US dollars. China is at about 15, 16 trillion US dollars. Economists and mostly everyone in the government machinery is more concerned about the GDP number, and they believe, it's generally believed that GDP is the economic barometer of the prosperity and progress of the country. Higher the GDP number, the better off the people of the country would be. Looks right and looks reasonably okay to think about that. But then we have Professor Amartya Sen, the Indian Nobel laureate. He got the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1998 for the thesis and research that he had carried out, and subsequently he published a book. The title of his book is Development as Freedom. Not very clear. Development as freedom as to what is going to be there in the book. Normally, when you go to a bookstore, you pick up a book, you look at the title, and you are able to probably get fair idea as to what are going to be the contents. But here, the title of Professor Amartya Sen's book is Development as Freedom. What he talks about in this book is, forget about the GDP numbers. Real development of a country takes place only when people have freedom. And here he's not talking about political freedom, he's talking about economic freedom, social freedom, environmental freedom. People should have freedom or choices, the way they want to live, the way they want to work, the way they want to study, the way they want to live their life. They must have choices, they must have that freedom. But of course, the two are interlinked together. You can't really have freedom of choices or freedom of looking at a career the way you would like it to go if you are not economically reasonably okay. Of course, that's also mentioned by the need hierarchy theory of Professor A.S. Maslow, where he talks about 5 different levels of human needs. The first being physiological needs, food, clothing, and shelter, roti, kapda, or makan. And then subsequently, it builds on the edifice of social needs, safety needs, ego needs, and then ultimately needs for self-actualization. That is why there is another concept besides GDP which talks about gross national happiness index, where it is considered and different parameters of social and environmental dimensions are also taken into account with a view to assessing the position of a particular economy in terms of national happiness index, gross national happiness index. Till about 10 years back, Bhutan used to top that list, but now they have changed some of the parameters of this evaluation, GNHI, and now top 5 positions are occupied by Scandinavian countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway. They are topping the list as of now. Besides the point is GDP is an inadequate metric to gauge the well-being of the people of an economy. What is important is ethics should prevail in the society. Ethics should prevail in the entire set of activities of the corporate world, including that of finance, so that these values or these set of values should go beyond shareholder profit maximization, and therefore they should be used as kind of an instrument or a tool to promote the well-being of the people over and above the GDP numbers that we normally talk about and look at. Before we dwell further into ethical finance, some people might ask a question, can actually finance be ethical? And the alternate question also probably could be, why would finance not be ethical? These are two simple questions, but their answers are far from simple. Addressing these questions requires understanding the meaning of ethics and its position in the financial business context. The concept of ethics or morality is complicated and perplexing since there is no universal agreement as to what qualifies as a moral or ethical. Everything is context based. Something which is done in one geography or one territory, one society may be acceptable norm, acceptable behavior, but the same may not hold true when it is done in some other society, some other economy. Similarly, any practice, any accounting policy, any financial management technique that you apply in a particular situation may not be acceptable in other economies. Just as you would have read, probably Islamic finance has an entirely different philosophy with regard to financial management that we otherwise follow and practice in non-Islamic situations. There, the concept of interest is considered something like that of a sin. That someone borrows money for the purpose of earning, paying out interest, and the lender, he gets interest on by lending the money. It is considered as kind of a sin. But then, of course, nobody would lend money to a borrower without getting any kind of rate of return. You may call that by different names. You may have a different model and structuring of the deal, maybe by way of zero coupon bonds or deep discount bonds or things like that. But nonetheless, Islamic finance philosophy is very different from that of the traditional Western world philosophy that we follow in finance. There are three key elements that financial sector should look at in order to operate within acceptable ethical parameters: moral virtue, human dignity, and common good. Moral virtues, human dignity has to be always ensured, upheld, and then the common good, good for the common, good for the people of overall, and not for the benefit of a handful of people for that matter. Ethical finance is where wealth and values meet investors. Someone who has money and wants to make investment is looking for investment avenues. Obviously, he's looking for getting some return on his investment. He's wanting to create wealth for himself by accumulating more and more returns on his investment and thus building up his capital base or net worth. But besides wealth, if the person also goes in for value-based investing, investment made on the basis of his value system, investment in sync with the kind of thoughts that he has with regard to the values and ethics, that's where the ethical finance provides kind of a bridge where the wealth and the values of the investors meet together. People don't have to sacrifice returns in order to feel good about the makeup of their portfolios of social finance. You can't simply say that I'm going to invest money in, it's not charity. Well, when you make investment in a charity, that's a different thing altogether. But here we are talking about people who are not only looking at investing in charity, they are not only looking at making investment in some kind of a donation fund, but they are looking for earning a reasonable rate of return, at the same time making sure that the money that they are pooling into a fund or pooling into a corpus is going to be utilized for something which is in line with their value system, in line with their moral standards, is in line with the common good for the world as a whole. So ethical finance is any activity that invests money in people and environment, supporting actions for social and environmental enhancement, provides credit without discrimination based on wealth, gender, ethnicity. Ethical finance is any activity that uses money as a means and not an end. Ethical finance is any activity that does not use money for purely speculative purposes, doesn't use money merely as a charitable action, doesn't aim at maximizing profits, but rather it supports any activity or organization that is sustainable in social and environmental terms. Ethical finance aims to develop a fairer and more equitable interaction between humanity and the environment through the global economy. So, what are the values that ethical finance promotes? Now, we have a European Federation of Ethical and Alternative Banks. In 2012, FEBEA drew up a list of key values to be used for identification of ethical finance institutions in Europe. I mean, before we delve into and get into ethical finance practice, we should know what are the kind of values, what are the kind of dimensions which promote ethical finance decision making. FEBEA considers first is origin of money. Ethical finance institution does not accept dirty money coming from illegal, speculative, or highly polluting activities. First, you have to have money. There has to be money flowing into your kitty before you have adequate amount of sources to be able to invest in certain other ventures. So ethical finance institution, an ethical bank, an ethical finance company is one which does not accept dirty money coming from illegal, speculative, or highly polluting activities. Then where will the money go? After origin, the next aspect is destination. The lending activities of an ethical finance institution are oriented towards positive social, environmental, and economic impacts. It supports activities to promote weaker human, social, and economic sections of the population and most disadvantaged areas by promoting social integration and employment. These are the places where the money is expected to flow when we talk about an ethical finance institution. So, what are the criteria and values for the use of money? Transparent management of loans, symmetric information between ethical finance institution and its customers. Everyone should have all kinds of equal information. Everyone should have access to all kinds of information for the money that they have put in a venture. There should be no asymmetry. There must be transparent management of loans and symmetric information between an ethical finance institution and its customers. The management and objectives of ethical finance institution. The ethical finance institution does not consider profit as an end in itself. Of course, a fair rate of return on investment is necessary to ensure reliability and affordability and sustainability. Profits are reinvested for the most part in the social objectives of the bank or the particular finance institution. What is the trend in the global market with regard to ethical finance? Interest in ethical finance is growing. It's an expanding market. As people want their cash to have a conscience, the ethical financial sector, in terms of value-based investments, is up by 20% compared with last year. And sales of ethical financial products or ethical products per se, not even financial, have risen by 18%. Investment is growing momentum globally and nationally at an exceptional pace. It has been estimated by Global Ethical Finance Forum that there are over $27 trillion worth of assets under management globally on an ethical basis. $27 trillion is a huge amount. This reflects a huge and growing market, with more retail and professional investors recognizing the ESG factors which have a material role to play in determining risk and reward. As the investment and finance market has developed, ethical principles are increasingly being seen as the new normal, providing essential benchmarks and controls to underpin investment and finance decisions. Increasingly, funds and lenders are being challenged when they are perceived as failing to apply suitable environmental, social, and governance factors in their decision-making process. Although still in its infancy, answers to difficult questions regarding profitability and sustainability of ethical finance are now beginning to emerge. An increasing amount of research data supports ethical finance as a viable and appropriate method for running a real economy. Then, of course, the moot question and the challenge in embracing ethical finance as a model, as a practical real life model, is how do we measure the impact of ethical finance? One of the most difficult challenges facing social finance revolves around the question, how do we measure social impact? There are, in fact, many different methods and models available to measure the social impact. But the crucial question concerns how to consolidate these many methods and derive at some kind of a standardized, some kind of a all-pervasive, acceptable measurement and evaluation system. At present, the impact measurement field is quite chaotic. Each institution, each region has its own assessment criteria and creates its own matrices. In fact, in recent decades, the Global Impact Investing Network and the Social Value UK, formerly known as Social Return on Investment Network, SROI network, have made efforts to consolidate their matrices. There hasn't yet been a single governing authority to establish an official and a standardized system of impact measurement and evaluation. But one of the strong tools, an instrument which is used for measuring outcomes of social impact, is known as social return on investment, or SROI. SROI is similar to ROI, return on investment, but it shows the double bottom line, the financial aspect of any project and also the social impact of an organizational corporate entity. SROI is a framework to measure and account for the value created by program initiatives beyond financial value. It puts a value on the amount of change that takes place as a result of the program and looks at the returns to those who contribute to creating the change. The change can be in terms of motivating people to do something, or the change can also be to prohibit or reduce the consumption of a particular product, or to change, modify the habits, behavior of certain people, which is undesirable. It can be both positive, it can be both negative, but then measurement of the impact of the social outcome is the key in order to calculate the social ROI. Just to give you a broad framework, how do we calculate SROI? First, you got to define the objective and the scope. Whatever program you are undertaking, it could be education, it could be helping the older people, it could be helping develop women empowerment. Any program that you are undertaking, you must first of all list out and lay down key objectives and the desired impact within a specific geographic area. Second aspect is identification and selection of key stakeholders. Who are the people? Identify individuals, identify groups, identify communities who will be impacted and affected by the activities within the scope of the program, both either positively or negatively. Third aspect is develop a business plan, theory of change, with a view to bringing about change in the society, amongst the people, either in terms of real outcomes or in terms of behavior, you got to develop a business plan. And a successful business plan is going to be one where there is adequate, reasonable, active participation of stakeholders in developing the business plan, because that brings the kind of ownership which is required for making any program successful. Then identify what are the inputs. In order to be able to execute, implement the business plan, what are the inputs which are required? Each intended outcome, there are going to be different inputs, and each input will have a cost or a time or some other resource associated with the same. Similarly, you first identify and then attach monetary values to the outcomes. What is that you are trying to achieve by implementing a given program? How will you measure the results? Can you convert them in some kind of a monetary rational or a monetary figure? That's where you find attaching monetary values to the outcomes. Then you calculate SROI ratio. SROI is tangible plus intangible value of a program to the community, which is equal to present value of impact divided by the present value of inputs. Present value of outcomes divided by present value of inputs required to implement or execute a program. And then simply mathematically, it can be expressed either in the form of a percentage ROI or a ratio or a NPV number, net present value. A lot of people try to get to a number for SORI ratio and it misses the truth. The point of SORI calculation is not necessarily to justify capital investment, but rather it is to understand value creation through capital allocation. In normal traditional sense, when we look at a project and we calculate ROI, we use that particular ROI as kind of a benchmark against the hurdle rate or the basic benchmark that the company might have decided that any ROI lower than this, the project would not be accepted. But any ROI over and above a particular number, the company will go ahead with the project. But here, the focus is not on a number to justify a capital investment, but rather it is to appreciate and understand how value creation will take place through efficient and optimum capital allocation. And then, of course, you have to do verification. Once the project gets implemented, you got to verify what has been the outcome, verify the stories, verify the results, verify the narratives, use qualitative and quantitative data, talk to different stakeholders, get their perspectives, find out what can be done in future to improve the outcomes of a given program. A lot of learning can happen at this stage while you're carrying out verification of any project of implemented with a concern for social and environmental outcomes. Why should you care about SORI? It helps improve your credibility. It helps improve your capacity to borrow. It also helps and provides you evidence. SORI proves that you collect and manage data and you are also interpreting that information to sustain your work. And the ultimate sustainability of your organization is also dependent upon how effectively you are using the SORI framework. There's a lot of growth which is happening in the business world with regard to ethical finance, but the question is, how can it be further improved upon? How can it be scaled further? Some investors say social finance market development has been held back partly by lack of suitable products to invest in, confusion surrounding proliferation of industry terminology, and the questions of whether or not investments can be profitable given their limited track record. To address these challenges, the social finance sector must come up with better ways to measure non-financial matrices, increase transparency of social and environmental impacts on financial performance, and create a wide variety of investment products. This includes not only improving products to meet investor goals and performance expectation, but also strengthening the enabling ecosystem, including infrastructure, skills, and incentives that shape business decisions to require to execute transactions. Let me give you a few examples of some of the products which are existing within the ethical finance environment. One of the important financing instruments being used across the world within the garb of ethical finance is green bonds. A green bond is like any other regular bond, which has a face value and which gives you a defined coupon rate. A green bond is differentiated from a regular bond by its label, green, which signifies a commitment to exclusively use the funds raised to finance or refinance green projects, assets, or business activities. So it's a bond like any other bond for that matter, but the label green means that there is a commitment on the part of the borrower who is raising money by issuance of green bonds, that the proceeds that he collects by way of issue of green bonds are only going to be used for green projects which don't pollute this environment, which are safeguarding or improving the conditions of the environment. The money is going to be used only in such kind of products. Further, there are different products available in the world market with regard to ethical finance. We have World Bank Sustainable Development Bonds. Inter-American Development Bank has issued Education, Youth and Employment Bonds. World Bank has also ventured into green bonds. Asian Development Bank has ventured into water bonds. African Development Bank has issued education support bonds. European Union issues sustainability-linked loans. If we look at the growth, how the interest of the world is growing towards sustainable finance and ethical finance, more and more people are looking for raising money through these particular products and deploying and putting that money into ventures that ultimately cater for and make sure that there are positive social and environmental outcomes in addition to the reasonably expected financial returns. The market is growing over and over year. This is the Climate Bonds Initiative research report. 2020 is going to peak further up, at least 15-20% up from 2019. And the interest has actually arisen beginning from the period 2014. Prior to that, there was negligible issuance of green bonds and such other kind of finance products. But since 2014, the market has been growing like anything. And you can see the bars over there, the way they have been peaking year after year. When you look at the classification where the money is going to be used, which is collected by way of green bonds, well, the maximum of that, 31%, is going towards energy. About 29% is for buildings, then about 20% for transport. And then, of course, you have other uses where the money is getting used, waste management, water management, land use, and other purposes. Well, Europe has been the market from where these funds have originated, and Europe provides the largest supply of ethical finance products and ethical finance money in absolute terms as well. After that, the second is Asia Pacific as well as North America, whereas other countries of the world as of now are currently lagging behind the growing trend towards ethical finance. When look at the emerging market green bonds issuance and China particularly, well, the China market is also, it's been growing since 2012. And for the last about 4 years, 16 to 19, it's almost on a statue, almost on a plateau kind of thing. But besides China, the emerging markets without China, ex-China, all bonds put together in $1 trillion currency, that's also showing a rising trend on a year-to-year basis. All this points out to the trend that ethical finance, green finance, sustainable finance, social finance, by whatever name you call it, is picking up and picking up very, very fast across the world. What's been the story in India? There are many companies in India as well which have also come out with issue of green bonds. In 2015, Yes Bank issued first ever green infrastructure bonds, raising an amount of 1,000 crores. Exim Bank issued a 5-year, $500 million green bond, which was India's first dollar-denominated green bond to help fund green projects in countries including Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Axis Bank has launched India's first internationally listed and certified green bond and raised $500 million. Exim Bank also issued Asia's second dollar-denominated green bond, raising $500 million. IDBI raised $350 million in BBB-rated 5-year green bonds for renewable energy projects. IREDA issued a tax-free 10 billion green bonds. CLP Wind Farms, a largest wind farm developer in India, became the first Indian corporate non-bank issued green bonds raising $6 billion. 6 billion rupees, sorry. Renew Power Ventures, a leading Indian clean energy company, issued the second corporate green bond amounting to 4.51 billion rupees. Hero Future Energy, a company of Hero Honda Group, Hero Motors Group now, $44 million. India's state-owned energy major company NTPC became the first corporate to raise $300 million through green masala bond listed at London Stock Exchange. L&T issued country's first SEBI-approved green bond. Incidentally, SEBI also has certain guidelines for classifying a particular bond issue as a green bond. There are guidelines available which you can very well see by visiting the SEBI website. And L&T issued country's first SEBI-approved green bond. IFC bought $103 million of L&T green bonds. IREDA once again came out with its first green masala bond issue. IRFC, Rural Finance Corporation of India, issued India's first listed green bond, which was listed on INX. When you look at it from the point of view of personal investing, what is ethical finance all about? Personal investing. You have some surplus money, you have some savings, you're looking for making some investment. What is the role and what is the understanding of ethical finance that might probably be interesting for you to consider and look at? Ethical financing or ethical investing is a strategy where one chooses investments based on a personal ethical code. What is that you support? What is the cause that you support? Be it in the social dimension or environmental dimension or even financial dimension. What is the dimension that you support as part of your personal ethical code? Of course, as I said earlier, ethical depends on the person. What is ethical to one person may not be so to the other person. That is why it is important to look behind the curtain of ethical investments and make sure that they are in sync with the impacts you would like to have. So first thing for you as an investor is to know what's ethical for you. Take some time to outline what is ethical for you, what is ethical investment for you. Identify industries you would like to support. Identify industries and areas of investment you would like to avoid, making it easier for yourself to include or exclude certain investment options going forward. Once you have identified what is ethical or not ethical for you, then you start hunting around for ethical investment options. Start building a portfolio that aligns with your moral compass. Start and see how well a company scores in terms of environmental, social, and governance factors and decide whether you would like to invest in them. By investing in socially responsible businesses, you are doing more than talking the talk. You are actually walking the walk with your company. You may have a very strong belief about ethical standards and moral standards, but then that's talking the talk. But here, once you also decide to invest in those ventures only which are in sync with your moral compass and the personal ethical code, that's where you start walking the walk with your money. By investing in socially responsible way, assuming that is aligned with your values, I think you will sleep better at night, knowing that you are trying to do some good in this world. There are many mutual fund categories that abide by socially responsible investing. So you have a choice. You can either decide to invest directly into the stock market, you can directly make investment in certain companies, those companies' activities, those companies' products, those companies' services you think are in sync with your moral standards that you can do, or probably you can look for a mutual fund which also makes socially responsible investing. Sharia compliant mutual funds are a type of socially responsible investing based on Sharia or the Shariat law of Muslim religion. These mutual funds adhere to Sharia law, which is the model code of conduct for Islam. Sharia compliant mutual funds are those which invest within the boundaries of Islamic laws. The key features of these funds are: don't invest in anything that could harm other people, either physically or emotionally, or that could harm the environment, or for that sake, even in companies which promote weapons. These funds forbid investments in businesses that generate a major portion of its income on certain undesirable products or undesirable activities. One of the mutual fund operating in India on these principles is Tata Ethical Fund. It's an open-ended equity fund which invests in a diversified equity portfolio based on the principles of Sharia. The investment objective of the scheme is to provide medium to long-term capital gains by investing in Sharia-compliant equity and equity-related instruments of well-researched, value and growth-oriented companies. There was another fund earlier, Taurus Ethical Fund. There was another one by Reliance, BSES, but since then, those two funds are no longer Sharia compliant. The only Sharia compliant fund operating in the Indian stock market as of now is Tata Ethical Fund. What are the challenges to scaling up ethical finance? There is no common industry-wide methodology used for identifying whether finance is ethical or sustainable. This leads to risk that the terminology may be used as a label to attract institutional or retail investment. So people may just try to say that this is a green bond and well, it can't be done because there are regulations, but I'm just giving an example. You can probably label your bond issue as a green bond and probably divert the money elsewhere and not invest that money in green projects. That's happening. I mean, people are using all kinds of techniques and strategies. That's happening in at least a few cases. There is also a risk of ethical washing, greenwashing as it is said, where people just try to cash on the green component, cash on the green philosophy, cash on the ethical finance philosophy, and try to garner funds which are later on diverted towards other means, not strictly kept invested in green projects and green products. There is a potential conflict as well between the classical corporate fiduciary duties, particularly to their shareholders, and adherence to a commitment to compliance with ethical finance principles. And traditional finance or traditional financial management books, James Van Horn, any book that you refer to, talks about maximizing shareholder value. Obviously, they are talking about maximizing shareholder value in financial terms. How do you marry the two aspects together, ensuring that you fulfill your corporate fiduciary duty, maximize financial returns for the investors and stockholders, at the same time, have a strong commitment to compliance with ethical finance principle You have to find a way out. You have to bridge the two together. You got to marry the two together with a view to ensuring that you are in sync with the requirements of the stockholders as well as that of society and environment. Increasingly, luckily, institutional investors and providers of finance are committing to compliance with internationally recognized standards such as that of UN Sustainable Goals. And as this market develops, consistent themes and principles are increasingly emerging in the marketplace. What are the imperatives and drivers of ethical finance? How do we move it forward? Facilitate asset allocation across multiple social finance strategies that caters to varying risk appetites and research or return expectations. No two investors are alike. Everyone has a different level of risk appetite and return expectations. If you just have a few products in the garb of ethical finance available in the marketplace, that may not be enough to drive the entire market because there are a whole lot of other people who may not find the likely level of risk appetite, or they may not be satisfied with the risk or returns being offered by these products. Therefore, you need to develop a bouquet of products, a portfolio of products across different asset size and asset allocations, across multiple social strategies, so that investors with varying risk appetites and return expectations can be brought within the fold of ethical finance. You have to design financial products in such a manner which provides for established return expectations, but at the same time, clear impact objectives. Not many people are really aware about the concept and operations of ethical finance, not only in India, but even across all different countries. You got to deepen social finance expertise and knowledge, particularly amongst advisory firms in the finance sector and the investment teams in the finance sector. You have to develop matrices for measuring the impact of investment made in different social and environmental supporting programs so that you can integrate social and environmental impact into valuation and pricing of the risk. Disclosures are critical. Anyone who puts his money in a venture with the objective of building up a positive social or environmental outcome would obviously be interested in getting information about that, how the project has fared going forward in that area in which he had invested his money a few years back or a few months back. So the traditional corporate reporting framework may not prove to be enough for that. Of course, interestingly, there is a new era of reporting emerging in the workplace now. We are talking about integrated reporting. Integrated reporting, the first distinguishing feature of IR is that it not only looks at capital as financial capital, it also looks at capital as social capital, relational capital, human capital, manufactured capital, environmental capital, and then, of course, financial capital. So instead of looking at capital only in a purely financial sense, it looks at 6 different dimensions of capital and tries to find out what is the impact of the corporate activity on each one of these capitals. Are you building value? Are you improving your net worth going forward or not? That's what should ultimately be disclosed to all the concerned people, all the investors, so they are kept abreast about the latest information about the progress of the project or the outcomes from a program. Of course, it's an emerging field. People are doing things in the process, they are learning. I think what is essential and what will actually drive it forward is sharing of best practices. Those who have successfully come out with a green bond issue, successfully done a bond issue, successfully invested in social and environmental impact projects, they should share their success stories, not only success stories, but also the problems and challenges so that other people also become aware about that and they can also slowly start building up their appetite for taking up or investing in those particular areas. Of course, you got to align your internal objectives with the external objectives and positive policies that can respond to and support broader uptake of social finance. The chief executive officers of different corporates and corporations need to ask certain questions from themselves. How embedded in our investment offering and process is the consideration of sustainability? Do we consider sustainability as one of the yardstick, one of the benchmark, one of the parameter while evaluating an investment into a new project? Do we have the right skills to understand sustainability implication? Do you know what are the best practices in the field of evaluating a project based on sustainability? Do we want to lead in the era of sustainable development? Do we want to lag behind? Do we need to review our current investment governance and decision-making processes? How well are we prepared in second line of defense? That is, how well we are prepared to deal with unprecedented situations, not only COVID-19, but any such kind of situation that might arise in future, how well prepared we are to actually deal with that based upon the kind of governance structure that we have within the company. How well we are interacting and engaging with the clients and customers on these issues of sustainability and ethics. What is our strategy regarding direction of new legislation? Are we engaging with regulators and legislators as they debate new rules regarding sustainability? Going forward, social finance faces a broad set of opportunities and challenges. In times to come, social finance will become inherent to the practice of investing in line with the progression to a conscious economy. This sector first needs to establish itself. It's not yet established. I mean, whatever numbers you may talk about, but still it's peanuts. It's a very, very small fraction of the ultimate volume of transactions taking place in the marketplace with regard to the bond issue. The green sustainable bonds market is yet in its infancy. What is now somewhat of a fringe concept will ultimately become inextricable from plain old normal investing. To integrate social finance into investment decisions, it is necessary to help asset managers, advisors, and intermediaries communicate, share the options and benefits of social finance more clearly with the investors. Investors are not aware, consultants are not aware, financial advisors are not aware. So a whole lot of chain in the financial investing sector needs to be educated with regard to the concept, philosophy, and practice of ethical finance. Any change in society erupts from change or shift in society-wide thinking. There is a need of global movement for impact investing, which stresses on the existing financial system to unleash the societal and environmental factors alongside making financial return. The new financial system based on impact investing will enrich our lives. The ethical finance market will grow, driven by product awareness, pricing, social and environmental concerns. Increased information about the sustainability performance of financial institutions driven by greater transparency and disclosure is expected to play a significant role in increasing consumer, regulatory, investor, and other stakeholders' awareness of financial institutions' direct and indirect impact on society and the environment. It's actually time for a new kind of capitalism. A capitalism which is more fair, more equal, and more sustainable. Capitalism that actually works for everyone, and where businesses don't just take from society, but also truly give back and have a positive impact. To be well positioned for the future, businesses need to acknowledge that their long-term value is increasingly intertwined and linked to their principles, practices, and impact on society. There is a growing body of evidence that suggests companies with good environmental, social, and governance practices outperform their less ethical counterparts. In a study of studies conducted by Dosh Asset and Wealth Management with the University of Hamburg in 2015, looked at 2,000 studies since 1970 in terms of impact on returns of investing along ESG lines. It found that 62.6% of the studies, the use of ESG criteria had a positive impact on corporate financial performance. Out of 2,000 studies, 63% of the studies mentioned that use of ESG criteria where the investment was made based upon the due consideration and parameters of environmental, social,
Sagar?
Hello, sir, your voice is not audible. Could you just repeat once again? I think the internet connection issue was there at my end. Could you just repeat once again what you said? Hello?
Yeah, Gupta sir is presenting again now.
I'm done with my presentation. I'll be too happy to take a few questions if there are any from the participants, please. I'll share my presentation with the chapter and you can probably circulate it to all the participants.
Sure, sir, definitely. And
Sure.
we are opening up the this session for the question and answers. So if any member, any participant has any question, please ask your question.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good
I'm
evening.
Anupriya Saha.
Yes, please.
I'm a CS student. Sir, as you stated earlier in the conference regarding $5 trillion economy, what are the steps taken by RBI to regulate banks and how ethics is playing role here or how ethics is involved?
This question is not directly related with ethical finance, but nonetheless, no problems. Well, the 2007-2008 financial crisis, which erupted on account of mortgage lending based on subprime in the US,
Yes,
it
sir.
impacted all the countries of the world. But luckily and fortunately, India was not so severely impacted as rest of the countries of the world for two reasons. One, that Indian economy at that point of time was not so interlinked and intertwined with the global economy. Proportion of our trade and share in the ultimate overall world trade at that point of time was very small, and therefore whatever happened outside India, it did not impact us much. But the second aspect of our resilience in that pandemic situation, the so-called financial crisis situation of 2007-2008 was that we had a robust regulatory mechanism existing in India, both in the financial market as well as other regulators. We had RBI, we had SEBI, we had TRAI, we had IRDA, and we had a whole lot of other regulators controlling the Indian economy, at least the critical sectors, in the most efficient manner, and thus prevented a kind of a depression into which otherwise most of the countries had gotten into post 2007-2008 crisis. Now, RBI is very closely watching the developments in the banking space. Recently, they came out, the government of India came out with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, where the banks who had piled up a huge amount of non-performing assets, 10 trillion at one point of time in 2016-17, that problem was thought to be addressed through the IBC, where the companies can be restructured, revived by following a corporate insolvency resolution process. And if that's not successful, then obviously the company is pushed into liquidation situation. RBI is also trying to recapitalize at least some of the banks. RBI is also looking for, and it has already happened, quite a lot of banks have got merged in the period of last 3 to 5 years. State Bank of India has merged many of its activities with a view to building up a larger conglomerate. Even the non-banking finance companies are being closely monitored by the prudential norms announced by Reserve Bank of India. The corporate restructuring will take place through the CDR mechanism, S4 mechanism, Joint Lenders Forum, all these situations which were existing earlier. These are also currently being closely monitored by Reserve Bank of India. So far as the regulation architecture or the regulatory architecture is concerned in the financial sector, I can say that India is pretty well off in that context, and all efforts are being made to further regulate that in the best interest of the economy. And financial sector definitely is going to play a very important, significant role in raising the level of India's GDP to $5 trillion going forward, in line with the clarion call given by our Prime Minister.
Thank you so much, sir. This was
Thank
very
you.
informative.
So it
Does
seems
anybody
there are
have a
no more
question?
questions. Probably we can close the session, sir. Yeah.
Does anybody have a question? Please unmute and ask your question. I think nobody have a question.
That's okay. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, on behalf of Pimpri Chinchwad Akudi chapter, I would like to request our PD committee member Sagar Malpure, please give a vote of thanks.
Sure, sir. On behalf of Pimpri Akodi chapter of Cost Accountants of India and its members, management committee, and the audience present over here, I would like to thank Mr. Gupta sir, CMA Gupta sir, for taking out their time on this evening, and thank you for giving your thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. It was a great session, and I hope all of us have enjoyed and enjoyed this session and got a very good knowledge from this session. And also I expect sir you have also enjoyed for being with us.
Thank you. Sure.
for
It was my
today.
pleasure. I really enjoyed interacting with the group here. Very, very, very useful interactive session. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I hope in future, in upcoming months
Yeah,
and
yeah.
weeks,
I have
we will
another
have-
session lined up with you sometime in December. Thank you.
Yep,
I look
sure,
forward to
sure.
that. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining with us. And thank you to all the participants who have joined this session and make this session wonderful. And thank you to those participants as well. Thank you, all of you. So with this, we are closing today's session.